Alright guys, today you're going to look at section 6.3, which is polynomials. We're going to look at this section today and tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow to answer any questions. Your notes for this section, or some of your notes for this section, are on the board right now. The first vocab word that you need to know is monomial. Okay, and a monomial is a single term, single number, or variable. Okay, mono is the root word for one, so this means one term. Okay, and a term is any numbers or letters that are connected together. Okay, so like 2x squared y, that is one term because they're not separated by a plus or minus, they're connected together. Okay, or you might just have a term of the number 3 or the letter x. Okay, so any single item is a monomial. And then your degree of your monomial is found by adding up all of your exponents together. So today we're going to look at the difference between a monomial and a polynomial and find the degree of those. Okay, hopefully everybody has those vocab words down. So if we look at example 1, A, B, and C, we are looking at different monomials. Remember, they're not separated by plus or minus, so they're one term. Okay, so negative 2a squared b to the fourth. Okay, we need to find the degree of that. And the degree of that is found by adding up all of your exponents. So in part A, I have an exponent of 2, and I have an exponent of 4. So I need to add those up to find my degree. So 6 plus 4, or 2 plus 4 gives me 6. So this is a 6th degree polynomial, or monomial. Okay, if I look at the number 4, I do not have an exponent on my number 4. So then this tells me that I have a degree equal to 0 because there is no exponent up there. Okay, and then if I look at 8y, there is no exponent up here, but when there's no exponent up here for letters, that means there's a degree of 1. It means there's an invisible 1 up there. So then this has a degree of 1, which we also call a first degree polynomial. Okay, so if I look at a few more of those, for checking out 1a, I have 1.5k squared m nothing, but that actually means m to the first. So to find my degree, I add up my exponents. 2 plus 1 gives me 3. So this is a third degree monomial. Okay, if I look at part B, 4x, there is no number up above this x, but that means there's a 1 above the x. So then this would be a first degree monomial because the degree is equal to 1. And then on part C, 2c cubed. This has an exponent of 3, so we would call this a third degree monomial because of the exponent of 3. Okay, so monomial is super easy. The other term that we're going to look at today is our polynomials. Okay, so polynomial is a group of monomials. So it's terms that are separated by pluses or minuses. Okay, poly is the root word for many. So that's why this means many terms. That's what that means. So polynomial. So an example of that would be like negative 2x squared plus 3x cubed y squared. Because there's a plus sign in there, you know that you have more than one term. They are separated by pluses or minuses. And then finding the degree of a polynomial is even easier than a monomial because the degree of a polynomial is just your highest exponent. Okay, so your biggest exponent is the degree of a polynomial. Okay, so if I look at example 2a, I'm given 4x minus 18x to the fifth. We know it's a polynomial because of the minus sign. That tells me I have more than one term. The other thing that I need to find is my degree. Okay, my degree is my biggest exponent. My biggest exponent in part A is this 5. So that tells me this is a 5th degree polynomial. If I look at part B, 0.5x squared y plus 0.25xy plus 0.75. I know this is a polynomial because of these plus signs. Then to find my degree, I look for my biggest exponent. My biggest exponent is a 2, so this is a second degree polynomial. And if I look at part C, 6x to the 4th plus 9x squared minus x plus 3. Because of these pluses and minus signs, I know it's a polynomial. The next thing that I have to look for is the degree. Your degree is your biggest exponent. My biggest exponent in this case is a 4, so this is a 4th degree polynomial. Alright, the third thing we're going to look at today is standard form. Standard form is where you write your exponents in order from biggest to smallest. Okay, so like 4, 3, 2, 1. You write them in order from biggest to smallest. Okay, so you're going to want to write that down. Then your leading coefficient is your very first number. Okay, not your first exponent, your very first number. Alright, hopefully everybody has those notes. So if I look at example 3, A, I've got 20x minus 4x cubed plus 2 minus x squared. Okay, so I want to write this in standard form. Standard form tells me I take my exponents and I number them from biggest to smallest. So 20x has an exponent of 1. Okay, then 4x cubed has an exponent of 3. 2 has an exponent of 0. And x squared has an exponent of 2. Therefore, my biggest exponent is this 4x cubed. So I need to take this whole term, which includes the subtraction sign in front of it. So I'm going to take that whole term and I'm going to write that first. So minus 4x cubed. Okay, my next biggest exponent is 2. So I'm going to take this whole term, including the minus in front of it, and that's going to come next. So minus x squared. Then my next biggest exponent is this 1. So I'm going to take this whole term plus 20x, and that comes next. And then my last exponent is this 0. So I'm going to take this term of plus 2, and that goes last. Now my polynomial is in standard form because my exponents go from biggest to smallest. The last thing that I have to do is find my leading coefficient. Your leading coefficient is your first number. My first number in this polynomial is negative 4. So my leading coefficient is negative 4. Okay, so let's do another one. Y cubed plus y to the 5th plus 4y. My first term has an exponent of 3. My next term has an exponent of 5. And lastly, 4y has an exponent of 1. So I need to put them in biggest to smallest order. So my biggest exponent is this 5. So I know that I'm going to take this whole first term, y to the 5th, and that goes out front. Then my next biggest exponent is 3. So I'm going to take this y to the 3rd, and that goes next. Then lastly, my smallest exponent is 1. So I'm going to take this plus 4y, and that goes last. So now my polynomial is in standard form. The last thing that I have to do then is find my leading coefficient. Your leading coefficient is your number out front. So if I look out front, there isn't a number there, right? But what number do we know is there if it's not a number? 1, right? There's always a number 1 out front if there's not a number there. So we know that my leading coefficient is actually 1. Alright, and then the last thing that we're going to do in this section is we're going to classify polynomials. So you guys need to copy this table, these 2 tables down on your notes, and you're going to keep them for your test. So make sure that you copy them down really nicely because you can use them on your test. The first table tells us the degree of our polynomial. The second table tells us how we classify the number of terms. So you need to have both of those down. Alright, hopefully everybody has that down. If not, then you'll need to get that down from somebody who does have it. Okay, so if I look at example 4a, I have 5x minus 6. The first thing that we do to classify a polynomial is look for the degree. So your degree of a polynomial is your biggest exponent. If I look at 5x minus 6, this x has an exponent of 1, this 6 has an exponent of 0. So my biggest exponent is 1. That means that my degree is equal to 1. If you look at your table, what do we call a function with a degree of 1? Well, I go down my degree column till I find 1. I see that that is called a linear function. So I know that the first thing is that I'm going to call this linear. Then the second thing I do is look for the number of terms. Terms are separated by pluses or minuses. So I have one minus sign, which means I have 1, 2 terms. If I have 2 terms, then I need to see how I classify that. So if you look at your terms line, column, and you go down to 2, where you have 2 terms, I can see that I call a function with 2 terms a binomial. Okay, bi means 2, so I have binomial. That means that if I were to fully classify this function, it's called a linear binomial. Okay, you have to include both. If I look at part B, y squared plus y plus 4, I need to first classify it by the degree. So this first term has a degree of 2. The y has a degree of 1. 4 has a degree of 0. So my biggest exponent is 2. So if I go back to my classifying polynomials table and I go down to a degree of 2, I can see that I call that a quadratic. So the first part of this is quadratic. Then if I look for the number of terms, I have 2 plus signs. So I have 1, 2, 3 terms. So if I go to my table and I go down to 3 terms, I can see that I classify a polynomial with 3 terms as a trinomial. Tri means 3, so trinomial. Okay, and then on example 4c, we have 6x to the 7th, so that degree is 7, plus 9x squared, degree of 2, minus x, which has a degree of 1, plus 3, which has a degree of 0. So my biggest exponent in that polynomial is a 7. If I go back to my table, and I go all the way down to where it says 6 or more, and then I go over and look, those are classified based on just the number of degree. So 6 would be 6th degree. So 7 would be a 7th degree. So we call this 7th degree. Next, I need to classify it based on the number of terms. Okay, I have 3 plus or minus signs. Therefore, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. If I go back to my table and I look for my terms, if I go down to 4 or more, anything with 4 or more terms is classified as a polynomial. So I would call this a polynomial. Therefore, this fully classifies as a 7th degree polynomial. Those are the things that you guys are going to be doing on your assignment today. We are working on this today and tomorrow. You are working through page 409, 1 through 57, except not 26. Notice that there's a gap. Your goal today should be to get through 1 through 25. If you get through 1 through 25, then keep going so that tomorrow you will make sure you finish in class.